We are really happy to convene this really important conversation on rail vision. I just want to make a couple of introductory comments and talk a little bit about how we got to where we are as the partnership with this. I'm J.B. Holston. I'm the CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. So a couple of contextual comments, and then I'll turn it back to Joe to lead the way. The rail vision, the Capital Region Rail Vision, which we're going to talk about, is designed to chart a course for the region to move beyond today's operations to one that's far more interconnected and expansive, so the regional rail network can enhance our regional economic competitiveness and collaboration, particularly so that it can accelerate inclusive growth, which we think is the defining opportunity for the region, and increase access to moderate and affordable housing options. It truly is foundational to where infrastructure needs to be for the future for the region. Maryland, the district, Virginia are ready to transform the rail network and unlock the potential it holds for creating an even more inclusive, interconnected economy. I wanted to thank all of our public agency partners leading the charge. We're here with us today, but especially Holly Arnold from the Maryland Transit Administration, Michael McLaughlin, who I think is going to be a little bit delayed, from the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, and Monica Backman from the North Virginia Transportation Authority. Thanks to all three of you for the work that you do in moving all of us forward. I get to use a lot of transportation dad jokes in this introduction. Joe did say that there's light at the end of the tunnel before we all got on with you, so I'm not the only one here. We're very excited about this work. As you know, we started back in 2018 with the blueprint for regional mobility. It sets a strategic path to better connect the region from Baltimore to Richmond. One of the key solutions that was identified at that point was the modernization of our regional and intercity rail network. We have an expansive rail network. It provides tens of thousands of trips each day before the pandemic, and but it's not a fully tapped resource yet for the capital region. The network today, as you know, is split between MARC, VRE, and Amtrak. And one of the findings that we'll talk about today is that the lack of coordinated planning has made rail travel more complicated, time-consuming, and less able to meet the travel patterns of the region than it can. And that limits our economic productivity, and it both leaves opportunities on the table for our region's residents, and neighborhoods, but it also unintentionally can exclude opportunity for others. So the rail vision, which we're going to talk about today, is designed to look toward that future, and as I mentioned, help us move toward a more interconnected and expansive regional rail network. Thanks again to all of our partners for participating in this. As with all of our work, this is always about convening the community to collaborate quickly. I can't come up with any other words that sound like they start with a C in that sentence, but to develop solutions that can scale at pace to catalyze those solutions. So we welcome the partnership with all of you, and I'm going to turn it over to our fearless leader, who is everyone's intermediary on everything to do with infrastructure for the region, Joe McAndrew. Joe?
Thank you, JB, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to be the MC for today's conversation. We're going to start with some opening remarks from Holly Arnold. Holly is the Deputy Administrator and Chief Planning, Programming, and Engineering Officer for MDOT MTA. She's a great partner. If you haven't met with her and worked with her, lucky that you're going to meet her today, and hopefully you will cross paths. But Holly has an extensive background in implementing innovative transportation projects with both public and private sector experience in the transit industry. At MDOT MTA, she oversees a team of over 200 in the planning, capital programming, engineering, construction management, real estate, and local transit support departments for the 13th largest transit system in America. And that is MDOT MTA, with an annual operating budget of $850 million and a 6-year capital budget of over $3 billion. She is a great partner to the partnership, but a great partner to the region. And with that, we're here today to really kind of unpack the Capital Region Rail Vision and start to look forward in terms of where we're going. And Holly, I'll hand it over to you if you don't mind to provide a few opening remarks before we open it up to a panel.
Sure. Can you hear me? I always like to check. Am I still on mute?
You got it.
Yeah. So first, let me say, thank you to JB, Joe, everyone at Greater Washington Partnership for having me at this event and for allowing MTA to participate in this vision. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the consultants on the project. And I really appreciate, it looks like there's, over 100 attendees. So really appreciate everyone's interest in this topic. As Joe said, I'm Holly Arnold, Deputy Administrator of the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration, long name there. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of Maryland and some of the things we've done along rail in the capital region and what we're looking forward to and what we hope to see from this vision. So I'm sure many of you on the call know, MARC train is vital to the economy of Maryland. Pre-COVID, we were providing over 40,000 trips daily on our 3 lines, so the Brunswick, the Camden, and the Penn line. Ridership right now is still down about 90%, but we are fully anticipating that as folks begin returning to offices at higher levels once the vaccinations continue to roll out, that we will see higher levels of ridership. We're closely monitoring it and we'll continue to kind of align our service levels with that ridership. And so rail will continue to play a really vital role in the economy going forward. One important thing to note and to keep in your mind as we're having this conversation and anything kind of to do with MARC is that we don't own our rails. We're what's called kind of a virtual railroad. So we run the service, but we don't own the rails on which we operate. So the Brunswick and the Camden lines are owned by CSX and the Penn line is owned by Amtrak. So we work very closely with our host railroads to ensure safe and reliable service. And anytime we want to change our service levels, we work in partnership with those host railroads to make those changes and adjustments. So one thing that's kind of interesting is, commuter rail has been operating in Maryland for over 100 years, going back to the 1800s, there's been some sort of kind of MARC service in Maryland. It's been part of MDOT-MTA's statewide service network since the 1970s. And looking back at all the changes over the past, over 100 years, there's been a lot. And really in the last 10 years, there's still been a number of service expansions and investments in MARC train that I wanted to just kind of bring up. So we've done station rehabilitations at Edgewood, Halethorpe, and then most recently, just finishing in 2019, Camden and BWI stations to make sure that they're modern and accessible. And then again, in the past 10 years, we added weekend service on the Penn line. Like that didn't exist before 2013, so still a fairly new addition. And additional kind of midday Camden line service in 2015. So those are things that are benefiting our riders and some expansions that we've done. We've also had a number of recent investments in railcar and locomotives. So, $60 million to purchase 8 new diesel Tier 4 environmentally clean diesel locomotives. And we're currently overhauling our Mark III railcars to make sure that they're clean and comfortable and safe for passengers. So those are some of our recent stuff. We also have a number of plans looking forward over the next 25 years. So we published in 2019 our MARC Cornerstone Plan, which really focuses on what we're looking forward to doing over the next 25 years. There's a big focus on state of good repair investments because we do need to make sure that our system is in that state of good repair, fix what you own first. But we also do outline some service expansions that we'd like to see, some of which are kind of included here in this vision. The Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan was also published in 2020. Focus more on the Central Maryland, Baltimore region, but does include run-through service into Virginia and some other service expansions for MARC to try and provide access to jobs from Central Maryland into the DC region. And soon to be published, this summer we'll have a draft out for comment, is our 50-year statewide transit plan that's kind of really laying a vision for what transit in the state should look like over the next 50 years. And that will also include a number of future investments in MARC service that MTA may pursue. So these include, in terms of state of good repair, locomotive and rail car overhauls, as well as we're looking at purchasing dual mode locomotives. So we want to be able to operate, in both electric and diesel, and that will help with those service expansions. Station access improvements are really big for us. A number of our stations are still not ADA compliant. We need to make sure we focus on bike and pedestrian improvements to make it safer for people to access our stations. A renewed focus on transit-oriented development you'll really see in our plans. We want to try and ensure that as growth happens in the region, that it happens around the stations that we have. And, continuing to work with our host railroads on state of good repair investments to the rails themselves. I mentioned our cornerstone plan. And so there's a number of important projects in that will help to enable the things that are in this vision that we're moving forward with. So recently, last week, we had a groundbreaking for our Riverside heavy maintenance building. So that's a building, to allow us to have our own facility to maintain our locomotives. It's not something that we currently have, and we rely on others to do that. So it gives us a lot more flexibility in maintaining our equipment and really lays the foundation for future market system expansion. We also anticipate starting on our Martin's Yard expansion project in spring of next year, thanks to a federal state of good repair grant in partnership with Amtrak on that. And so that will expand our storage capacity at that yard to accommodate 2 additional train sets. It addresses some critical needs for storage for any potential system expansion. As we expand, we need more places to keep trains. We're also kicking off this spring the Penn Camden connector. So right now, the Penn and the Camden lines only connect in Union Station. So if we want to move a train from one line to the other, we have to go all the way down to DC and back. So we're very strategic about how we move trains. But if we build this Penn Camden connector, it will allow us to make that connection in the Baltimore region, have a lot more flexibility in terms of how we maintain our trains, again, allow for service expansion. And as part of kind of a future phase of that project, may allow for access on the Penn line into downtown Baltimore. So you can go on the Penn line to Camden Yards. Still in the planning phases, but we're looking forward to that. I wanted to touch a bit on the federal funding. So we have been so thankful for the CARES, the CRISA, and the ARPA relief packages. That funding has really been critical to support our current operations and allow us to restore service when ridership begins to return. And we're also really excited that the federal government is looking to be a key partner in this work. Our congressional delegation has been actively engaged in identifying funding and projects as part of the annual budget and any sort of potential infrastructure package. And these additional federal funds are going to be invaluable to any future successes that we have as a region. Outside of that, we're actively engaged with our regional partners in DC, Virginia, and then Delaware and Pennsylvania too. We don't just provide service south, we also provide north, as well as our host railroads, Amtrak and CSX, to explore kind of expanding rail service in Maryland, similar to what's kind of outlined in the regional capital region rail vision. So we are exploring run-through service to Virginia. We've done some public outreach on this and appreciate Joe's help and Greater Washington Partnership's help with that. We participated previously in WashCog's run-through ridership study, and we're engaging currently with their technical advisory committee. And again, not just south, we're also looking to the north to provide that service there. Folks want to go from DC into Pennsylvania. Currently, there's the one commuter rail gap that exists on the Northeast corridor is in Maryland from Perryville into Delaware. And so we're looking to see what we could do to expand our service there to connect up with SEPTA. And so there we're engaging with WMAPCO to work on a ridership study that's currently underway. And we're looking to see what we can do there. So, for both projects, we're beginning the discussions with our regional partners on service parameters, necessary infrastructure, and kind of working through all the issues that come about with those. So I'll stop there. Could talk about rail stuff all day, but I appreciate Greater Washington Partnership for engaging us in this, and we look forward to working with you guys and our stakeholders to improve our regional service in the years ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Holly. Thank you, JB. I think what's important to note is that there's a lot of activity, and what Holly hit it on the head is that we have a federal partner right now and an opportunity, and a lot of activity from what MDOT/MTA is leading to. What's happening at Washington Union Station down into Virginia with the Transforming Rail in Virginia program. We've got a lot of opportunity, and I think knitting it together is really important. So with that, I'll go ahead and thank Holly and JB for joining us and invite the panel to jump on with us. We are very, very fortunate for having a great region of doers, of smart people wanting to work together to try to tackle our biggest challenges, from WMATA's 2018 funding deal with the region coming together in Virginia, Maryland, in the district to solve our funding challenges, to the Long Bridge effort, to the American Legion Bridge effort. We've got a recent history of changing our efforts to work together to try to drive at big things. Regional rail is one of those big things that if we can get it right, as JB said, we've got a huge opportunity to better connect our region, better open up affordable and moderate housing and economic development potential throughout the broader super region, and drive for a more competitive region. That's what the genesis of the Capital Region Rail Vision is. In the chat, my colleague just dropped a link to the Rail Vision. It is expansive. It is a lot of work that went in over an 8 to 9 month period with a village full of experts, both on the public sector side, with some here today, as well as key stakeholders in the business community, the advocacy community, really helping us drive at a bold vision. Behind all of that was a team of project experts from the companies of EY, Gensler, VHB, and WSP that were helping us make sure that we were not doing anything too crazy, that our efforts were sound and bold and achievable. And today, what we're going to try to do is unpack the rail vision, give folks in the public a better sense of what we were striving to achieve, answer any questions, and then hopefully it opens up the door for everybody to work together to implement, because these big projects take a village. They take commitment over many years, not just to make an initial investment, but also to streamline the actual operation. So we'll go at the start here with a moderated conversation and open it up at the end for public Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, drop it in the Q&A and we'll get to it as we can. But before we get going, I'll go ahead and introduce the group of rail experts that we have with us here today that we were very fortunate to work with. First, we have Drew Galloway, Senior Technical Advisor for Rail Planning at WSP USA. Drew has over 4 decades of experience in multiple railroad functions, including operations, planning, forecasting, capital programming, finance, and law. He previously helped lead the development of rail services and strategic capital planning at NJT Corporation, the nation's 3rd largest system, and for Amtrak's Boston to Washington Northeast Corridor and Eastern services until assuming a national role at WSP. Drew was a founding member of the NEC Commission, a federally chartered collaboration between the 8 states of the NEC, Amtrak, USD, DOT, and he continues in the senior advisory and technical roles to advance railway projects and services operating in over 20 states in the US and Canada. We've also got Willow Latham, Senior Associate with EY Infrastructure Advisors. Willow is a Senior Associate with EY Infrastructure and is part of the U.S. Infrastructure and Advisory Group. She has over 4 years of project management and infrastructure experience, both in the U.S. and internationally, in sectors including water, transit, and telecommunications. Drew Morrison, project planner with VHB. In that role, he manages major transit and rail infrastructure projects in the Washington, D.C. metro area, including Washington Union Station, Montgomery County bus rapid transit initiatives, and projects related to the implementation of Amazon HQ2. His work focuses on helping clients address the policy and political strategies to advance key projects. Prior to VHB, Drew worked for the Montgomery County Maryland Council as a transportation infrastructure and environment policy aide. Drew holds a BA in economics and political science with a concentration in urban studies from Yale. While working at VHB, somehow he's finding time to also get a joint city planning and business master's degree at MIT. And then also we've got Hannah Olin, design manager at Gensler. Hannah is an award-winning experiential designer and project manager in Gensler's DC brand design studio. Hannah leads a variety of project types from urban planning and transportation to workplace and hospitality. Hannah analyzes her experiences and creates the brand, vision, and storytelling for each of the projects that she touches. Hannah is also the DC chapter chair for Society for Experiential Graphic Design, Shaping the Future of the Industry. Whew, Man, we got some talented folks. I will say I was very lucky to work with these four and their colleagues, helping shape the rail vision. To get things started, you all provided, graciously volunteered your time and expertise alongside our regional partners to help us create the Capital Region Rail Vision. The vision at a high level charts a path for our region to both run trains through, create more interoperable systems, but greatly expand our service beyond the peak service that we see today. To get things started, might I go ahead and ask folks what most excites you of the rail vision? What, in your opinion, are the exciting kind of game-changing solutions that we put forward? I might start with Mr. Galloway.
And thanks, Joe. I think what it is we're seeing a new generation of mobility, and it's connecting the region in ways that historically hasn't existed. It's recognizing how in this case the Capital District and its mobility needs has changed over time, and is responding to it in a way that really is cutting edge in some respects, but also I think very appropriate from an environmental perspective, and a land use perspective, and a whole bunch of other characteristics. So it's exciting to be part of changing the game here a little bit.
Excellent. Hannah?
Hey, thanks, Joe. I think the most exciting part is just how bold this vision is, and how it's going to, impact people in the DMV area and surrounding. And I think that it'll create, this really nice domino effect of different projects that start to come out of the rail vision. So excited for the future to come.
Definitely. Willow?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really come up over the past year of working on this is like that transportation systems are only as useful as the connections that they let people make. And so this vision is super exciting to me because there's been so much thought put into, strategically as a region, what do we want the system to do? And even more importantly, like who do we want the system to serve? So I'm really excited to see, how interested and engaged the operators have been with going beyond the 9-to-5 commuter and really making the vision work for the communities that these lines run through.
Here. I agree. Mr. Morrison?
From my standpoint, the most exciting piece is the timing of this. We are at a moment where some of the key projects are ready to move forward, where things like transforming rail in Virginia are really allowing us to see a whole new vision of rail, and where specific activities like through running are getting more attention than ever before because of that economic change that Drew mentioned earlier. So we're really at the right time to take advantage of the momentum in the region and move things forward.
Certainly. Well, thank you. And thank you all for joining. Drew, we'll stick with you. You and the team at BHP really kind of helped us think through what the phasing looks like. We do want to go from zero to hero as fast as we can, but understanding that that's going to cost a significant amount of money and collaboration across jurisdictions. We thought really hard and at phasing it, what the phasing looked like, and what an implementation schedule might look like. If you could, not too wonky now, which I know you can get to, but at a high level, provide a bit of an understanding of the planning phases that we put forth, as well as some of the stepping stones and the key elements to getting there, such as run-through service and delivering night and weekend service.
Joe, thanks. Happy to do that. And exactly as you say, we want to get to a broad vision of what the future of regional rail can be. It's really important to really have a focused incremental strategy to get there over time so that we make progress for the riding public while not losing sight of the overall vision. We outlined 4 phases: launch where we are today, expand where we hope to be as projects like Long Bridge come online, realize as the full suite of infrastructure projects in the region come together, and transform of how we take all of that infrastructure and combine it with a world-class service plan that really takes the most advantage of the infrastructure we're building. We set these out as a way to do 2 things. One, for the public to understand the range of different projects that are coming together, are in the pipeline, that need to happen to really make a transformation possible, but then also to show how we can make continued service progress along the way. So we don't need to wait for 2045 to see real ways that this region can get more connected. And in particular, one thing we've heard from stakeholders over the years is, I want to be supportive of more regional rail, but I don't know how to have the best impact. And that's part of the stepping stones piece of the report, which is outlining 13 different service elements that make up what regional rail can be. So some folks are very interested in through running. How can we connect across the Potomac? Some folks see weekend service to Harper's Ferry as a great way to open up tourism in West Virginia and Western Maryland. So if you're interested in different pieces, one other I'd mention is evening service, with so much focus on the wider range of workers who might benefit from regional rail. Moving beyond the 9 to 5 peak is of interest to a lot of folks. If you're interested in those different pieces of the service plan, the report outlines what needs to come together for those to be possible, so you can work with agencies and other advocates to advance those pieces of a future regional rail system.
Definitely. And all this work builds on big plans, right? Our region has big plans in the rail front, whether it be VRE's 2040 plan, transforming rail in Virginia, and the DC2RVA EIS, the Northeast Corridor, Futures Program, the Mark Cornerstone plan, and the COGS run-through market feasibility study showing us that we have a market for the run-through. And then, what we've tried to do is knit those plans together and articulate through the good work that Drew and the collective team here did to identify paths forward. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Help chart a course forward that everybody sees, whether it be their station, their line, or the collective region, how we can get there. Drew Galloway, from your experience, many areas along the Northeast Corridor, from Boston to New York to Philadelphia, and now with this region, we've been talking about it for decades, though. We've long discussed run-through train operations, but few have really actually executed upon those plans. Philadelphia now has a new plan out to try to increase their run-through operations, which is great to see. But what, in your opinion, is holding the U.S. back from regional rail run-through operations, and what are some priorities for the region to consider at this early phase to make sure, as some of our infrastructure bottlenecks come offline, whether it be Long Bridge, Union Station, and the like, that we're in position on day one to make sure that we can run those trains and run them at the frequencies that the consumers demand?
Plenty of answers there. And I think it's useful to think a little bit about the legacy of the system, which was privately invested and funded by private railroads who served their markets. And on the intercity side, they actually worked very well on interoperability and connection. But on the commuter side, it was to serve their market from their region to a central business district. The consequence of that is there's both infrastructure, physical and operational and economic events and barriers that come from that. Something as simple as the station was never designed to account for through running. Chicago Union Station has 24 tracks in it that are useful. Only 2 are able to pass through and operate as a regional service. So physically, it would have to change to enable something of that nature. Philadelphia, and you mentioned it, Joe, built an underground 4-track connection, a half-mile connection through the center of the city in the 1980s to connect one system with the other. There's barriers in terms of equipment. New York City, which requires by municipal law electric operation in Manhattan, there are 3 different types of electric traction systems: overhead, catenary, and 2 different types of third rail systems. So each of them have their own constraints in terms of thinking of how to operate from the city through the city in a major substantial way. There are platform height differences, there are equipment differences, and the financial barrier to overcome some of these sunk costs can be quite substantial. Operationally, we can think about a through running operation requires more discipline and tighter operation and resources to apply to make sure that it's reliable and operates perfectly. One of the challenges on that is very careful planning to avoid federal hours of service law restrictions that come into play. And when you have a much larger network and system, there are events that start to come into play, and it's a larger focus than you would otherwise think. And I think the last part is market. And the legacy systems were built for essentially journey to work to a central business district and return for each of their own separate systems. Suburb to suburb markets were never viewed as a critical factor, and in some cases, suburb to an extended core became the case. That's really what Philadelphia is. I'm happy to say here, our analysis has shown that the market here for a through operation is substantial. And the demand is already in place, and you don't necessarily see that for some of the other systems. So that to me is a very distinguishing characteristic.
Certainly. Couldn't agree more. And the demand for my commute would be great if we could solve for it, but it's not all about me. It's about the region. So Hannah, Willow, both of you spent considerable amount of time and energy focused on what the future experience looks like or could look like or feel like for the rider, which is important, to encourage and induce more riders on the system, but also make sure that we've got a clear and coherent system as trains start to move beyond its historic terminus at Washington Union Station and into new territories. Hannah, can you describe or a little bit of the design principles that Gensler used in developing both your renderings, but then also kind of your suggestive style guides?
Sure. So as far as seamless rider experiences go and kind of crafting the ideal rider experience, I think that the one seat ride makes a huge impact. So we've already got that down. That makes trains, more reliable, less kind of touch points people have to go through, less likely for interruptions to happen, and ultimately more likely that they will, ride on this specific rail line. I mentioned kind of the domino effect. I think that with these new train lines, there comes huge opportunity to start to rethink the stations and how the stations can better work with the rail line and what they can offer to the surrounding communities. So in terms of the station design and the principles that we've used, first and foremost, they need to feel safe and comfortable. So providing clean, open, well-lit spaces, in addition to adequate wayfinding to direct to the various modes of transportation being utilized in that station. And then beyond the functional aspects of the station, we can really start to offer some authentic experiences driven by the surrounding area. So whether that's restaurants or retail coming into the station or adjacent to the station, a place for people to grab dinner for their family on the way home, or knock out some errands. We can start to think of these stations as kind of a one-stop shop or something that's beyond just transit oriented. So it's not just the transit itself, but it's really about creating that branded experience that caters to the lifestyle wants and needs of the rider.
Excellent. Willow, you took a good hard look at what the future of regional fare and ticketing operations might look like. Do you want to give us a taste of the strategy or recommendations that you guys that we put forth in the Rail Vision as part of the study?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, just a quick summary on what we're talking about when we say fare integration. It sounds, not that exciting, but really it's just being able to go from one system to another using one ticket or pass. So like most obviously here from like MARC to VRE, but also, from Amtrak to Metro or Baltimore Link. Because most of the time when we're traveling, to Hannah's point, we don't necessarily need to understand, and we don't necessarily care where the boundaries between one system or another are. It's about, from getting where we are to getting where we need to go as quickly and as painlessly as possible. So it's exciting to take this on in the vision because it's really about making the user experience front and center when we look at how we pay fares, which is super important, especially in this region, just because there's such a variety of modes, such a variety of providers that people are using on a daily basis. And right now, Mark and BRE, of course, have separate fare systems, have separate pass systems, and actually have separate mobile payment systems. So it's something that both of the operators seem really excited to work on, and I think that there's a lot of potential going forward. And beyond just the customer experience, the roadmap that we're talking about here is really exciting because it actually lays out a way to go forward thinking about the regional transportation system in a new way, like really as a network that we can, access data and act on data that's just at another level than what we can use right now. So we can do a better job in making service interruptions have less of an impact on the way that the service runs across the system, and also, which is really important, be able to make sure that things like fare capping or incentive pricing that we use to make the system accessible are actually reaching people effectively and are reaching people across the system effectively. So that's super important. And it's great to see like the roadmap that this whole team has put together for actually making progress on that front.
Definitely, I agree. We've got a couple more questions here, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. If folks feel inclined, please drop questions into the Q&A box, and we'll get to it here in a couple minutes. Drew, I'll bucket a couple kind of Drew Galloway. The running joke for the last few months, there was Drew WSP and Drew VHP, and that's how we kept them separate. They look very similar, of course, but Drew WSP, there's a reason you kind of hinted on it a little bit of some of the challenges that we face in terms of different historic operations and how the differences still impact or create challenges today for interoperability. We didn't preclude electrification on the system, but we also didn't say that it was necessary to be able to be successful to achieve the ridership goals, the economic productivity, and the outcomes that we're looking for. The same is true for platform heights. And there's a question that came up in terms of, can freight and passenger trains interact well together? It'd be great if you could take just a couple minutes to unpack kind of the thinking behind, the pros and the cons and where we landed on the recommendations and the rail vision.
Sure. And I'll start with the electrification side first. I think it is well known that true high-speed performance, let's say above 120 miles an hour, really requires an electrified system to get the right type of energy requirements into the train. The regional vision here is not thinking of speeds of that nature and modern, the newest technology, and Holly mentioned this with the Tier 4 compliant locomotives on order or on the property, are very environmentally beneficial in many respects and have very good performance in the 80 to 100 to 120 mile an hour range. That didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, and it's something that has emerged and become a very useful tool. Electrification also presents a lot of challenges for freight operations with overhead clearances as well as side clearances. It may or may not require changing the signal system because there's now large amounts of traction power return circuits and current operating in the track. And you have to account for that both on the wayside and as well as on the equipment. It presents a higher level and a different level of safety and training for all the employees, whether it's freight or passenger on the ground. And there is a risk because you have essentially a lethal voltage in the wire. So the combination of it really has been the emerging technology with the diesel seems to allow a very good application for this regional service, but still take advantage of the electrified portion of the Northeast Corridor as it is. In terms of platform heights, it really gets back to the freight operation again, and there are the freight railroad and freight operations in North America and Canada and Mexico, actually, for that matter, require different clearances than you see with the high platform operation on the Northeast Corridor with Amtrak and one or two other locations within Maryland itself. And that clearance issue really has driven a two-level system, with a high platform on the Northeast Corridor and a low platform on the and controlled and train line from the train crew itself to accommodate that. And so while it would be nice to have uniform platforms for everybody, it's not essential. And there's actually good procedures and equipment designs that can accommodate that quite well.
Perfect, thank you. One last question, then we'll open it up for the audience. There is a lot of activity in Virginia and Maryland and in the district on regional rail. But to knit this entire thing together, it takes coordination, strategic vision, and execution. To the collective here, before we open it up, maybe what are the biggest near-term needs that you guys see that's in the 5-year implementation plan that's in the technical report that you would encourage the stakeholders on the phone here to lean in on with us to help deliver the vision? Maybe we'll start with Willow.
Sure. So yeah, I think to echo my earlier point, I think there's an opportunity here to help redefine what the target market for regional rail looks like, expanding beyond that 9 to 5 commuter. So in some of the other work we've done for the partnership, we've found that actually almost 3/4 of trips, or more than 3/4 of trips taken in this region, aren't taken by commuters at all. They're taken by people going grocery shopping or bringing kids to school. So how to incorporate those trips into the functioning of regional rail is super important, and it's a challenge. But it's also an opportunity to think strategically about opening up these new ridership markets through new service like off-peak service and weekend service, which is in the vision, and as Joe mentioned, is also in some of the plans that the vision is building on. And also, to think about what stations look like when they're not just a commuter hub. So that's something that a lot of these communities need to help define as well, and how the benefits of better service actually get farmed back into these communities as well. So I think that's a great thing that everyone here can do is help define that conversation.
Yeah, I think we as a region here have a national kind of leading position on the transit-oriented development conversation, but that traditionally has stuck to more rapid transit options and not necessarily to our commuter rail operations. And I think for us to be effective and successful, especially as service ramps up, we're going to need to look to activate our economic centers around these new stations. I think we've got over 60 stations in existence today, and that creates 60 new opportunities for us to think creatively about increasing economic productivity there and jobs access and other types of opportunities. That's great. Mr. Drew VHB, if you want to go next.
Well, I think to build on that station point, the next step is for communities to think together as corridors. We have opportunities within the short term to improve all of the commuter regional rail corridors coming out from the center of the region. And one thing we need to move to is communities, both local and in the state, working together to identify what's the piece of the puzzle that I can help advance. Can I contribute to a planning study that's going to advance a key piece of infrastructure? Can I work with a series of different station communities to identify how TOD gets linked together and drives ridership? So I think one of the great opportunities we have to think regionally as well is then to link those corridors north and south of the Potomac with the work that COG did around the through running study and the through running elements that are here, as well as the broader range of improvements. Folks need to start looking at their neighbors up and down the line and start working on how they can collaborate on funding and planning together to move projects forward.
Definitely. Hannah, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll just build on that piece about community. I mean, in my opinion, it's never too early to start bringing the community in to get their input. I mean, you know, we don't know what it's like living in every single different place that the rail system is going to touch. So really engaging them early to, you know, not only make sure that we're marketing and targeting their wants and needs appropriately, but allowing them to feel like they're a part of this journey as well, so that when the system goes in, they can be advocates on behalf of their community members to talk about it and voice their opinions about it and tell their neighbors and friends how they were a part of this and helped craft this vision. So I think the community engagement piece is really key.
Certainly. Mr. Galloway?
Bring money. I'm saying that somewhat tongue in cheek, but everything that Hannah and Drew and Willow talked about, which are fabulous investments and enhancements to the region, requires a substantial enrichment to the service. Whether or not it is through running, as we talked about, or a continuation of expanding the service that's in place today, it'll take strategic investments, capital investments at strategic locations in
It's the New Jersey Wi-Fi.
to deliver the service. So I think the other component to that is knowing that this is a large investment program, is to start now in terms of thinking, coordinating the engineering projects, making sure they're being built to standards that are compatible, that can eventually lead towards this broader expansion of service. So that's something that can happen immediately and can begin on that process. And then it will actually ultimately unlock those great benefits.
Definitely. One question, and I'll hand this to Drew, VHB. There's a question that came in about about post-COVID recovery. In your estimation, from these stepping stones, what would be the most cost-effective way to quickly expand service frequencies, and where might that be expected on the system?
Yeah, so quickly is an interesting question, and it really depends on, as Holly mentioned at the outset, what are the agreements with the freight rail operators? What can we achieve? There's some opportunity in some ways that weekend service is something that may have some more flexibility. We wouldn't expect it to be the highest ridership opportunities, but it may be able to tie into special events and certain economic development goals that folks have. If we're looking to expand, this range of people that we're looking to serve, maybe we look at opportunities to change where the focus of the span of the service is, to move maybe toward more of a service sector peak towards a 9 to 5. In terms of increasing that overall level of service, that's going to take infrastructure and going to take agreements with the operators, but all the more reason to begin those conversations soon.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And there's two questions. I'm going to go ahead and marry them up together. One is, do rail projects like this need to go through the MPO planning process and make it their way onto the plans? And there's another question about, have we thought out the institutions that need to be part and party to this effort? Fortunately, we were very lucky to have the MPOs present on the advisory committee that I'll speak to in a second, that were with us every step of the way in the development of this vision, as well as with Holly at M.MTA, DDOT, DRPT, and BRE, Amtrak supporting the endeavor as well. But we in the Capital Region Rail Vision document that was released in December listed out, the various parties from the governors and the mayor to the federal delegation, the local elected officials, and the like, and kind of what their roles and responsibilities are. And I'd say, we're optimistic where things are going. It's the collective we here, of course, but as the federal, just one anecdote in terms of leaning in, as the federal conversation around, economic recovery and infrastructure programs have gotten off the ground, our federal delegation have really leaned in a significant way throughout the capital region, from Maryland, DC, and Virginia, doing their part. Representative Norton is really working hand in hand with folks throughout the region on Washington Union Station and making sure that project gets done, but also has a little bit of funding to get off the finish line and keep moving forward on the design. Our friends in Virginia are doing great work to continue to find funding and secure funding for Long Bridge and the larger Transforming Rail in Virginia program. And we're cautiously optimistic that Amtrak and the state of Maryland are really going to lean in a significant way and address the greatest bottleneck on the Northeast Corridor, the BMP tunnel. A lot of folks would have you believe it's the gateway, but we've got an older tunnel that needs to get fixed, and it's got a finished EIS and is ready to go. We're optimistic that those two parties are leaning in to work together. But the MPOs, the state DOTs, everybody has a role and responsibility. And we mapped it out, and we've been working with them from day one. And we're optimistic that the collective we in this region are ready to move forward together on this one. I will ask one last question, and then we'll go ahead and move to closing remarks. And this goes to Drew Morrison at VHB, who VHB is currently working on the Long Bridge project, I do believe. When is the groundbreaking expected for Long Bridge?
Well, we have a little bit of time to go there. We're just jumping in to the final design work, so we'll make sure to pass along to everybody, the invitations when we're digging in there. But that's definitely overall, the time frame of a critical piece that through engineering and construction we're looking forward to later in the 2020s, towards the back end of the decade, but it's going to be a great opportunity to open up the region and a key piece of the overall vision. Perfect.
Hey, well, we're going to go ahead and close down this panel and then move into closing remarks. But to the four of you and your teams, you guys gave a great service to the region, to the partnership and the collective. Thank you very much. I know you guys are on speed dial for everybody on this phone, or on this Zoom. So let's all work together with these great teams and to push it forward. So thank you. I will ask for you guys to close your cameras and ask Monica and Mr. McLaughlin to turn on your cameras. We are, when it comes to any transportation project, it's a village that moves the effort forward. It takes commitment over many years and many different parties. We had Holly earlier, and now we're very fortunate to have Monica Bachman and Michael McLaughlin here with us to close things out. Monica joined our advisory committee that comprised, the NPOs, advocates, and the like, stretching from Baltimore to Richmond, working with us, helping guide the effort. And Mike and his team provided technical support for the endeavor alongside Holly and colleagues at DDOT, VRE, and Amtrak throughout the exercise as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Monica. Monica has served as the executive director of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority since May 2014, bringing more than 20 years of public and private sector transportation experience to the job, helps guide Northern Virginia's transportation planning through the transaction plan and investments through the Northern Virginia transportation funding regime that they have there. Due to time, I will stop there. It's a very, very extensive bio, but Monica's a great partner to us and to the region. And so with that, Monica, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks to everyone and our partners. I'd just like to note that we were happy to have been a part of the advisory committee for the Capital Region Rail Vision. This effort really couldn't have come at a better time. Virginia, with the successful completion of the Transforming Rail in Virginia program, is poised for great growth in its regional rail capacity that benefits VRE, Amtrak, freight railroads, but more importantly, the region that we call home. It benefits all of us. The Northern Virginia Transportation Authority is proud to partner with the Greater Washington Partnership, Holly and Maryland Department of Transportation, VRE, NVTC, our local partners, and of course, the Commonwealth of Virginia to advance this effort forward. In our capacity, the authority has advanced with regional revenue funding that Joe noted, about 18 rail projects totaling $243 million. Some of these projects include the Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station, Innovation Station, Crystal City Metro and VRE stations, and of course, the Franconia Springfield Passenger Rail Bypass. Again, our region is well positioned to leverage potential federal investments from the Biden administration and our congressional partners. NVTA, we're ready to partner with our local, state, and federal delegation to leverage our resources to maximize these new funding and financing sources. The rail vision and a strategic path to enable run-through service between Maryland, DC, and Virginia will really enhance our region's ability to grow more inclusive and more sustainable. Thank you to the panel, to the partnership, and for everyone for working with the region over the past year to build this rail vision. The authority, we look forward to working with everyone to deliver results for our region in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Really appreciate it. And next, we'll go to Michael McLaughlin, fresh off of a Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting where he secured a boatload of rail funding, I imagine. Mike is the Chief of Rail Transportation for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, joining DRPT in October 2017. Prior to that, he was the Deputy Chief of Staff for Chicago Transportation Authority and had many good years on Capitol Hill as well. Mike, I will hand it over to you to, do you have good news maybe? I don't know, but thank you very much for joining us here.
No, thanks for having me. Today was, we're teeing up our FY22 6-year improvement plan. So it was not a vote today on any funding or anything of that nature, but it's a continual discussion we're having with the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and we're also having with our Virginia Passenger Rail Authority boards. I did reference the VPRA budget today too, on funding for the $3.7 billion. So no new news, was just briefing them on some of the budgetary proposals. So I'll be really quick. And I wanted to, sorry I missed some of the other presentations earlier, but I want to start off with something that Secretary Valentine just left me with. A little more than 10 years ago, Virginia started off passenger rail with $17 million pilot program for a Lynchburg train. Now we're talking about $3.7 billion program to go from 6 Amtrak trains to more than double that. And we'll be adding 5 more VRE trains on the Fredericksburg line as well. And also everything that we're doing is making what Greater Washington Partnership and their vision is talking about is even possible. And that is the construction of Long Bridge, the agreement with CSX to build a Long Bridge and also build 4 tracks on the Virginia side in Arlington, Alexandria, and the DC side near the L'Enfant area to even make run through a possibility. So, and I know your vision is one of a coordinated rail community, not just a rail community, but larger community. And I think everything we're doing in Virginia is toward that goal. And I do want to thank Monica and her NVTA team for that funding for the Franconia bypass, which will decrease conflicts with freight and passenger trains near the Franconia area. So appreciate Monica and her support of that project and the larger program projects. And also Joe McAndrew, Greater Washington Partnership. He did not pay me to say this, but he's been a great partner, very, very supportive of what we're doing, and has stepped in whatever need be. And he helped talk to some folks in Capitol Hill to get some legislation passed for us to even be able to build a bridge, a National Park Service land, which is could be a panel on its own story, that story alone. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to continue working with Joe and the others here.
Mike, thank you. Thank you. Monica, thank you. And to the collective panel and Mahali, thank you very much. It takes a village to move this effort forward. I think what we've got with the vision is a plan, a strategy, but we've got to both fund near-term projects like the Transforming Rail in Virginia program, like Washington Union Station, like BMP, to get to a future where we're going to have seamless, interoperable opportunities. So we've got to go ahead and execute, and that takes the collective capital region folks to be able to deliver not just the rail outcomes, but the regional benefit of connecting more employees to jobs and opportunity, better connecting our region and our cultural assets and our economic centers. It's all possible. It takes a political will, but in recent years, we've shown that we've got that capacity, and we're excited with where we're heading. I think we've got momentum, and we, with the vision, we're looking forward to working with our public sector partners, our business partners, and our advocate friends throughout the capital region to make sure that we can go ahead and deliver this one and transform our region's outcomes as a result. So thank you all for joining. Please reach out if you have any questions, and we look forward to working with everybody to move this effort forward.